Christmas parties in corporate America aren't really parties. They're performance reviews with fairy lights. Ours was in a downtown hotel ballroom. Open bar, rented stage, the exec team hovering near the front like they owned the air. Sales reps laughed a half-second too loud and kept checking their phones, pretending they weren't doing commission math. I'd been at Briarstone Systems for 6 years, mid-market SaaS. I wasn't the loud closer. I was the guy who kept accounts alive. Renewals, expansions, problems handled quietly before they became disasters. That year, stable stopped being a word anyone used. We'd lost 2 enterprise deals in a row. There were whispers about a post-holiday reorg. Finance started delaying approvals. Sales ops tightened permissions in the CRM for governance. When a company starts talking about governance, it means someone's about to get blamed. My boss, Evan Cole, hated quiet. Evan loved optics. He smiled with his whole mouth and said, "We're a family," right before he asked you to sacrifice a weekend. 2 weeks before the party, Evan messaged me, "Send me a quick rundown on your top accounts. Notes, risks, next steps. Need visibility for planning." That request sounds normal on paper, but Evan didn't ask for visibility when things were fine. He asked for visibility when he wanted leverage. I sent the rundown, clean, professional, nothing emotional. Then I did what I always do when something feels off. I backed up my own work product the right way. Emails were already in Outlook. Meeting notes were in the approved OneNote notebook. Renewal red lines lived in our contract repository. No secrets, just receipts. Because in sales, the story that wins is the one you can prove. 2 months earlier, Evan promised our biggest client, Orchard Ridge Logistics, features we didn't have. They were ready to walk. I spent weeks rebuilding the relationship. Honest timelines, realistic commitments, written escalation paths. When they finally renewed, it wasn't because they adored the company. It was because they trusted me. That trust is currency, and Evan was about to spend it. Near the bar, I saw Evan with our VP of Revenue, Dana Mills, and 2 Orchard Ridge executives. The CFO, Marcus Hale, was there too. Sharp suit, cautious eyes. Marcus spotted me and his shoulders eased. "Ryan," he said, "good to see you." I stepped in to greet him, but Evan moved first. Not dramatically, just a hand on my upper arm, guiding me back half a step like he was making space. He leaned toward my ear, still smiling at the group, and whispered, "Move. Let the real people talk." My brain tried to reject it, tried to translate it into something harmless. Then Evan turned to Marcus and said, bright and confident, "We're excited about 2026. Orchard Ridge is a priority, and Derek will be your primary point of contact going forward." Derek. Derek Lane was Evan's favorite. 28, loud confidence, expensive haircut, always first to volunteer for anything that involved being seen. He wasn't incompetent. He just wasn't careful. The kind of rep who'd promise the moon if it bought him applause. Marcus blinked, then looked past Evan to me like he was checking whether this was real. I felt heat rise in my neck and forced my face to stay neutral. Not because I was calm, because I refused to give Evan the satisfaction of watching me break in public. Dana kept her smile. "We'll make sure the transition is seamless. Transition, like trust, can be forwarded like an email." Marcus set his drink down slowly. "Why?" Evan laughed, soft and practiced. "Just aligning resources. Ryan's been great, but we're scaling. Derek's going to bring additional horsepower." Horsepower. Evan loved words that sounded like strategy. Derek appeared at Evan's shoulder as if summoned by his own name. He shook Marcus's hand too hard and said, "Can't wait to level this up." Marcus didn't smile back. I could have corrected Evan right there. I could have forced the room to acknowledge the lie. But I knew what Evan would do afterward. He'd smile, act wounded, and later tell HR I was combative with a client. He'd turn it into a professionalism issue. He'd make me the problem. So I didn't give him that weapon. I stepped back. I nodded once. I let my silence hold the discomfort in the air. After a few seconds, I excused myself like nothing happened and walked to the far side of the room, staring at the cheap holiday centerpieces until my breathing steadied. I watched Marcus return to his group, and I saw it in the way he moved. Careful now, not relaxed. It wasn't just the insult. It was the timing. You don't tell a client their trusted contact is being replaced at a party. You do it carefully, with a plan. Evan did it because the room was loud and everyone was drinking, and he assumed I wouldn't fight back. I stayed anyway. I watched him work the room, how he laughed, how he collected attention, how Derek followed like a shadow. The more I watched, the clearer it became. Evan wasn't only pushing me aside socially, he was removing me from the story. Around 10, I stepped outside into the cold for air. My phone buzzed with a Slack notification from Sales Ops, a calendar hold for the next morning. Subject: Territory plus account alignment confidential. Attendees: Evan, Derek. Sales Ops leadership, not me. I stared at the invite until the screen dimmed. Then an automated email from our CRM hit my inbox, the kind most people ignore. Your access request has been updated. I hadn't requested anything. I opened it anyway. One line, bland and corporate. Change processed. Account team update. No details. No explanation. Just a timestamp. 9 minutes ago. I slipped the phone back in my pocket, walked inside, and smiled at the first person who made eye contact, like I was fine. But in my head, one sentence kept repeating, if he's confident enough to do it in public, he's already done it in private. I didn't sleep much, not because I was spiraling or imagining worst-case scenarios, because I was doing math, real ugly math, pipeline influence, renewal dates, contract clauses, who had which approvals, and what would happen if a client heard a different story from a different mouth. At 6:11 a.m., I was at my kitchen table with my laptop open, coffee I couldn't taste, and the CRM loading like it was taking its time on purpose. First thing I did was search Orchard Ridge. The account was still there. My notes were still there. The renewal documents were still linked. For half a second, I wondered if I'd overreacted to a drunk ego move at a Christmas party. Then I clicked the account team panel. Primary owner, Derek Lane. Secondary, Evan Cole. My name wasn't even listed as support. Not removed from ownership, not transitioning. Just gone like I'd never existed. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I exported the audit trail because I knew, from bitter experience, that people love to pretend systems don't have memory. The audit log showed the change timestamped at 9:02 p.m. last night, right when Evan had his hand on my arm. He didn't announce a transition. He performed one. I opened other accounts. 2 more were changed, then 4, then 7. Not random ones. My cleanest book. The clients with the highest renewal probability. The ones I'd been babysitting all year. The ones that made numbers look good. I pulled up the team's general channel. People were posting blurry party photos, laughing emojis, great night, and shout out to Evan for keeping us all together. I didn't react. I didn't type. I opened my calendar. At 9 a.m., the Territory Plus Account Alignment confidential meeting started. I wasn't invited, but I could see the room booking. Glass Conference Room B. I drove in early anyway. The office was quiet in that post-holiday way, empty desks, dim lights, the smell of burnt coffee from the break room. I sat at my desk and didn't storm in. I didn't march to Evan's office. I watched. At 8:57, Derek walked in carrying 2 coffees like he'd won something. Evan followed a minute later, coat still on, already talking. They didn't look toward my row. At 9:03, Sales Ops, Karen Patel and Jonah Briggs, joined them in Conference B. I recognized Jonah from the admin panel. He managed CRM roles. He also managed people's careers without ever talking to them. The meeting doors shut. I waited until 9:12. Then walked to the printer down the hall as if I had a reason to be there. The glass wall gave me a clean view. Evan was talking with his hands. Derek was nodding hard. Karen was looking down at a laptop like she was following a checklist. This wasn't a conversation, it was a procedure. I went back to my desk, opened my email, and waited for the part where my name would be erased officially. At 9:27, my inbox pinged. From HR Shared Services, subject, org update, role alignment. I didn't open it right away, I just watched the preview line. Effective immediately. That phrasing is a gunshot in corporate language. I clicked. It wasn't a layoff notice. Not yet. It was worse in a quieter way. Effective immediately, your responsibilities will be adjusted to support internal initiatives. Your manager will provide next steps. Internal initiatives. That's what they call it when they don't want you talking to clients anymore. 5 minutes later, Evan appeared at the end of my row, like he'd been rehearsing his expression. He stood beside my desk, hands in his pockets, voice low and friendly. Hey, quick sync. I turned my chair slowly. Sure. He smiled like last night never happened. We're shifting coverage. It's a strategic realignment, nothing personal. My jaw tightened, but I kept my tone even. You moved Orchard Ridge. Evan blinked once, then shrugged. We need Derek on it. He's got bandwidth and momentum. Bandwidth, momentum. More words. Marcus trusts me, I said. Evan's smile thinned. Marcus trusts the company. That line landed like a slap, because it was a lie he wanted me to accept. I stared at him for a beat. Did they ask for a change? Evan leaned in, still soft. Don't make this difficult, Ryan. It's done. Then he straightened up, and the friendliness disappeared behind a management voice. You're going to help with enablement and process cleanup for Q1. We'll circle back after the holidays. Just keep your head down, okay? Keep your head down. That was the real instruction. He walked away before I responded, like the conversation had a script and he'd reached the end of it. I sat there, hands on my keyboard, and felt something in my chest shift. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Because it wasn't just that he took the accounts. It was how clean he did it. If this was only about performance, he would have talked to me first. If it was about client fit, he would have planned the handoff properly. This was about taking credit. I opened the Orchard Ridge account again and clicked through the attached documentation, renewal deck, escalation notes, the timeline I'd built for their feature rollout. Everything I'd written was still there. My work was the track marks. Derek could drive the car, but the road was mine. I opened the billing tab and looked at the invoice schedule. There was a code on the last adjustment, something I'd never touched because finance handled it. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I recognized the structure. It wasn't a sales tag. It wasn't a standard revenue bucket. It was one of those internal labels that only exists when money is being moved for a reason nobody wants to say out loud. I copied it into a note. Then I checked the other reassigned accounts. Same code. Again and again. My skin went cold. Because now I wasn't looking at a petty ego move. I was looking at a pattern. At 10:04, my phone buzzed. An email from Marcus Hale at Orchard Ridge. Subject: quick question. The message was short. Ryan, who should I be contacting now? Derek reached out. I'm confused. I stared at the screen and felt the first real pull to act, to warn him, to tell him the truth, to stop this before it blew up. But I didn't answer right away. Because if Evan was doing this, he was counting on me reacting emotionally, counting on me stepping into a trap. So I took a breath, opened a fresh document, and started listing facts. Not feelings, facts. And in the middle of that list, one sentence formed in my head, quiet and final. I didn't know it yet, but this realignment was going to cost them everything. I didn't reply to Marcus right away, not because I didn't care, because I knew exactly how this gets framed later. If I told him, Evan stole your account, Evan would call it insubordination. If I told him Derek is unqualified, it becomes me undermining the transition. And if I stayed silent, Marcus would assume I'd abandoned him. So I wrote something that was true, measured, and hard to weaponize. Marcus, I'm still here. I've been pulled into an internal Q1 initiative, but I'm available if anything urgent comes up. If Derek reached out, loop me into the thread, and I'll make sure you get a clean answer. I hit send, then forwarded the email to my personal work folder, labeled Orchard Contact, the same way you file evidence without calling it evidence. By 10:30, Derek had already replied to Marcus with a cheerful paragraph, full of vague promises, including one sentence that made my stomach drop. We can probably accelerate the roadmap if you're open to revisiting your service tier. That wasn't negotiation, that was bait. Orchard Ridge hated being upsold. It was the entire reason the relationship almost died in the first place. I watched it unfold in real time, Marcus responding with a single line. Ryan never mentioned this. What changed? Derek didn't answer for 15 minutes. Evan did. He wrote, Happy to discuss in the new year. Derek's stepping in to bring additional options. Options, always options, like they were doing the client a favor. My hands hovered over the keyboard. The old version of me would have jumped in, smoothed it out, saved the deal, taken the hit, and kept the peace. But then I remembered Evan's whisper at the party. Move, let the real people talk. So I didn't rescue Derek, not yet. I did something else. I opened the CRM audit log again and pulled every reassigned account into a table. Account name, owner change timestamp, approving user, and, most importantly, the same strange internal code tied to each adjustment. The code wasn't something you'd see on a normal account record. It appeared under billing exceptions and internal adjustments, the kind of field only finance or RevOps touched. I needed to know what it was before I did anything loud. I walked 2 floors down to finance under the pretense of grabbing a printout. I didn't march into someone's office like an action movie. I just approached Nina Park, senior analyst, the kind of person who speaks softly and fixes problems everyone else pretends don't exist. Nina and I had history, in a good way. 2 years earlier, a customer had claimed we double-billed them. I'd stayed late with Nina reconstructing the ledger until we found the error. Real, fixable, not malicious. She never forgot who helped her when it was inconvenient. I stood at the edge of her desk and said, Quick question. I'm on a process cleanup assignment. Do you know what this code refers to? I didn't say my boss stole my accounts. I didn't say I think something's wrong. I said process. Corporate people relax when you say process. Nina looked at the code, then didn't look at me for a few seconds. Her fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. What is this tied to? She asked. Billing exceptions, I said. I saw it repeated across a few accounts. How many? Her voice was neutral, but her eyes weren't. I gave her a number. 8? Nina leaned back slightly. That code is restricted. Restricted how? She glanced around without being dramatic. Finance people don't do drama. They do consequences. It's a retention reserve bucket, she said. Not customer retention. Company retention. It's meant for specific approvals. CFO sign-off, documented rationale, compliance visibility. It's not supposed to be used for casual adjustments. Casual. That was her polite word for theft. I kept my face still. So why would it show up across multiple accounts right after an ownership change? Nina hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Because someone is moving something, not just accounts. My throat felt tight. Moving what? She turned her monitor slightly and showed me a screen of internal budget categories. I didn't ask her to open anything she shouldn't. I didn't ask her to commit career suicide. She only pointed. That reserve offsets revenue risk, she said. If a deal looks shaky, people try to stabilize it by reclassifying concessions. Sometimes that's legitimate. Sometimes it's a way to make one person's performance look clean and another person's look messy. And if it's done wrong? I asked. Nina looked back at the code and lowered her voice by half a degree. Then it becomes an audit question, and audits don't care who your boss is. I nodded like I was absorbing a process lesson, but inside, something broke into place. Evan hadn't just taken my accounts to give Derek a trophy. He'd taken them to control the narrative attached to them, especially the money. Back at my desk, I pulled up my compensation portal. It wasn't dramatic. It was a plain HR site with plain numbers. My Q4 commission estimate, something I'd been tracking all year, had been adjusted downward, not by a little. It wasn't labeled penalty. It was labeled allocation revision. The system didn't say we're stealing from you. It said we updated the math. I opened my sent email folder and searched the phrase strategic realignment. Evan had used it in past conversations, always before something unpleasant. I found a thread from 3 months ago where he'd asked me to document risk exposure for Orchard Ridge. Risk exposure. If he could label my accounts high risk, then he could justify pulling reserve funds into them, and then justify shifting credit away from me when the reserve funds got touched. It was clean, quiet, and if nobody asked questions, it would look like normal corporate mess. But I had screenshots, I had timestamps, I had the old account notes showing who did the work, and now I had Nina's confirmation, without her putting anything in writing. I stared at my monitor and felt the moment I'd been avoiding arrive anyway. Not rage, just a cold understanding that the rules were not going to protect me. Only proof would. At 3:18 p.m., Derek sent a mass email to the internal sales team, bragging about taking over Orchard Ridge and opening a pathway to accelerated expansion. He CC'd Evan and Dana. He didn't CC me. I didn't reply. I opened a new email, addressed it to Sales Ops, Karen Patel, and wrote one sentence. Hi, Karen. Can you confirm the approval workflow for retention reserve code X appearing on multiple customer accounts after a territory change? No accusations, no emotions, just a question with a blade inside it. Then I saved it as a draft, because once you send something like that, you don't get to pretend you're still playing small. I sat back, looked around the office, people laughing at holiday leftovers, talking about vacation photos, and I realized how alone this kind of moment is. They thought I was just salty about a handoff. I wasn't. I was watching a machine that was about to eat somebody, and I had to decide whether it would be me or them. I didn't know it yet, but the next email I sent would change the temperature in the entire company. I stared at the draft for a full minute before I sent it. One sentence. No drama, no accusations, just a control question with a timestamp behind it. Then I hit send. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The office sounded normal. Keyboards, coffee machines, half-hearted holiday small talk. I almost wondered if Karen would ignore it and let Evan bury me quietly. And then silence, the kind that means someone, somewhere, just sat up straight. At 4:07 p.m., I got an automated ticket response from Sales Ops. Request received. Will review and respond. At 4:11, my Slack stopped updating. Not down, not erroring, just stuck. I refreshed. Same. I tried on my phone. Same. That's when I noticed the smaller detail. The little green dot next to my name wasn't green anymore. It wasn't red. It wasn't anything. I walked to IT, calm on the outside, heart hammering behind my ribs. The IT guy at the front desk, Miguel, looked up like he already knew. Hey, I said, casual. My Slack's not syncing. Miguel tapped at his keyboard, then frowned in a way that wasn't personal. Your account's in a restricted state. By who? Miguel hesitated. HR can request it. Sales Ops sometimes requests it. It's not an IT decision. That told me everything I needed to know. Evan had felt the heat and reacted the only way managers do when they're afraid of records. They don't answer questions. They try to stop the questions from being asked. I walked back to my desk and opened my email. If they wanted me off Slack, fine. Email has a longer memory anyway. At 4:26, Evan called. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered on speaker, not because I wanted an audience, because I wanted my hands free to take notes. His voice came out softer than usual, like he was trying on concerned. Ryan, what are you doing? I asked Sales Ops a workflow question, I said. That wasn't a workflow question. His calm slipped for half a second. That was, you implying things. I implied nothing. I asked who approves that code. Evan exhaled through his nose. Listen, I get it. You're upset about the account moves, but you don't get to light a fire in finance because your ego's bruised. My ego. He really thought that was the angle. I kept my voice even. If it's normal, the answer will be simple. It is simple? He snapped, then caught himself. It's handled. It's fine. You need to stop. Now. I paused, not for drama, for precision. Evan, I said, if it's fine, why is my Slack restricted? Silence on the line. Then in a quieter voice, that's temporary. HR recommended it so things don't spiral. They already spiraled, I said, last night. When you reassigned Orchard Ridge during the party. He lowered his voice like we were sharing a secret. You're not thinking clearly. You're jeopardizing your career over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That was his new word for a documented change log. I'm thinking clearly, I said, and I'm not emailing anyone else without being asked. But I'm not retracting the question. Evan's tone hardened. You're forcing my hand. I almost laughed, but nothing about this was funny. Do what you need to do, I said. I hung up, then opened a fresh document and wrote down 4:26 p.m. Evan called, told me to stop, mentioned HR restriction, then I saved it. At 5:03, a new calendar invite landed. Subject, Revenue Integrity Review, required. Time, 8:30 a.m. Tomorrow. Attendees, Sales Ops, Karen, Finance, Nina's Director, Compliance, Legal Ops, and me. Evan was on it too. So was Derek. My stomach tightened, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was that strange, clean certainty you feel when the train has already left the station and you can stop guessing. I packed up. I didn't storm out. I didn't tell anyone. I went home and printed everything I was allowed to print. Emails, CRM audit logs, exported change histories, Compi portal screenshots. Nothing confidential beyond my scope. Nothing stolen. Just my own work and the system records tied to my accounts. That night, I didn't sleep much either. But it wasn't panic. It was preparation. At 8:27 a.m., I walked into conference room D with a thin folder and a laptop. Karen from Sales Ops was already there. Tight posture, polite face. Two finance people sat side by side with that we don't like being here energy. And at the end of the table was compliance. Leah Romero, the kind of person who doesn't smile until she has a reason. Leah nodded once. Ryan, thanks for coming in early. Evan arrived a minute later, and for the first time since Christmas, his confidence looked slightly off. He was still smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Derek came in last, trying to act casual while his leg bounced under the table like a nervous tell. Leah opened a notebook. This is a control review, not a disciplinary meeting. We're here to understand the sequence of changes tied to restricted budget code usage. She didn't look at me when she said that. She looked at Evan. Evan leaned forward immediately. We can clear this up fast. It's a simple alignment initiative. Ryan's taking it personally. Leah didn't react to the word personal. She slid a printed sheet across the table, an audit log summary. Evan, she said, can you explain why 8 accounts changed ownership within a 20-minute window, and why the restricted reserve code appears on all 8 as an exception marker within the same cycle? Evan blinked, once, hard. Derek opened his mouth like he was about to volunteer himself as the hero. Leah raised a hand without looking at him. Derek, not yet. Karen cleared her throat. Also, just for the record, the standard workflow requires documented approval. We don't have tickets for these changes. The finance director, Mr. Tully, finally spoke. And we don't have CFO sign-off attached to that reserve code. That was the first micro crack in Evan's mask. His jaw tightened. His smile became smaller. He tried again. The CFO doesn't sign off on every operational adjustment. Mr. Tully cut in, calm and deadly. On that code, yes. That's why it exists. Leah turned her eyes to me. Ryan, you raised a question about the workflow. Do you have any supporting documentation you want us to consider? This was the moment where an emotional person would deliver a speech. I didn't. I opened my folder and slid out 3 pages. Timestamp screenshots, account ownership before and after, and my commission estimate adjustment with the revision label. Here are the audit timestamps, I said. Here's when I was removed from the accounts. Here's when the comp allocation was revised. I'm not making an allegation. I'm asking how the workflow was followed. Leah studied the pages. Then she asked something that made the room feel colder. Has anyone instructed you to stop communicating about this? I didn't look at Evan. I didn't need to. Yes, I said. Yesterday at 4:26 p.m., Evan told me to stop and said HR restricted my Slack to prevent things from spiraling. Evan's head snapped slightly toward me. That's not what I... Leah held up her hand again. Evan, we'll come back to you. For the first time, Derek stopped bouncing his leg. Karen's eyes dropped to her laptop, typing fast. Mr. Tully leaned back, gaze fixed on Evan like he'd just noticed him for the first time. Leah closed her notebook slowly. Okay, she said. Next step, we're freezing further account ownership changes, locking the reserve code and escalating this to the CFO and legal for review. Until then, no one discusses this outside this room. Evan tried to smile again. It didn't work, because in corporate life, there's a point where the language changes. Not realignment, not misunderstanding. It becomes review, controls, documentation, sign-off. And those words don't care who's the boss. As we stood up, my phone buzzed in my pocket, vibrating nonstop. I glanced once. 17 missed calls, all from Evan. And the meeting invite that just hit my calendar had a new title. CFO plus legal emergency review. Required attendance. It was scheduled for 1 hour from now. By the time I walked back to my desk, my Slack was working again. No apology. No explanation. Just restored. Like someone had flipped a switch and hoped I wouldn't notice it had ever been off. Evan kept calling. 17 missed calls turned into 23. I didn't answer. Not because I was trying to punish him. Because I'd learned something about people like Evan. If they can't control the records, they try to control the conversation. And I wasn't giving him anything he could twist into Ryan admitted or Ryan threatened. At 9:58 a.m., I got an email from compliance. Subject: hold notice, account and budget controls. 1 paragraph. Clinical. All account ownership changes are frozen pending review. Restricted reserve code access is locked. Do not modify related records. That was the first time the company stopped pretending this was interpersonal. At 10:12 a.m., Marcus Hale called me directly. Not an email. A call. Ryan, he said, no greeting. What is going on over there? I kept my voice steady. I can't speak for internal process, Marcus, but I can tell you this. I'm still here, and I'm still responsible for making sure you get clean answers. If anything you've been told doesn't align with what we agreed, pause and loop me in. There was a beat of silence. Then Marcus exhaled. Good, he said, because Derek just promised we could accelerate features again. And that's exactly what you told me you wouldn't do. I didn't, I said. I know, Marcus replied. That's why I'm calling you. The trust wasn't gone. It had just been shaken. That mattered. At 11 a.m., I was back in a conference room. But this time it wasn't glass walls and sales ops. It was the CFO's floor. The room was smaller. The air felt different. Less social, more surgical. Legal was there. Compliance was there. Finance was there. And at the end of the table sat the CFO, Adrienne Shaw, a woman who didn't waste words. Evan arrived late. Derek came in behind him, pale. Adrienne didn't greet anyone. She looked at Leah from compliance. Walk me through it, she said. Leah laid out the timeline like a prosecutor without the theatrics. The ownership changes, the reserve code markers, the missing tickets, the comp allocation revision, the attempted restriction of my communications. Then Adrienne turned to Evan. Explain, she said. Evan tried the same move he always used. Warmth, then fog. Adrienne, this is getting blown out of proportion. We were aligning coverage, and Ryan, Adrian held up a hand. I didn't ask for adjectives. I asked for an explanation. Evan swallowed. The reserve code was used to stabilize risk on certain accounts. It was operational. Mr. Tully from finance didn't even look at me when he spoke. He addressed Adrian. The code Evan used is not operational. It's restricted for a reason. It requires your sign-off. Your sign-off is not present. Adrian's eyes didn't widen. She didn't react like a movie. She just turned one page in the packet in front of her and said, "Then who approved it?" Nobody answered fast enough. Adrian looked at Derek. "Did you request these account moves?" Derek's mouth opened, closed. He glanced at Evan like he was waiting for permission to speak. That glance was the whole story. "I was told it was handled," Derek said finally, "that Evan had it cleared." Adrian nodded once, like she'd expected that. Then she looked at me. "Ryan," she said, "did anyone ask you for consent or notify the client in writing before these changes were made?" "No," I said. "It was announced at the Christmas party." Adrian's gaze shifted back to Evan. "You did it at the party," she repeated, like she was tasting how stupid it was. Evan's voice rose slightly. "It was an informal mention. We were celebrating. I didn't think—" Adrian leaned forward. "That's the problem," she said. "You didn't think. You moved restricted funds without approval and reassigned key accounts without workflow. And then you restricted an employee's communication channels after he asked a control question." Evan tried to speak. Legal cut in calmly. "Evan, at this point, we're not debating. We're documenting." That's when Evan's face changed. Not anger, fear. Because he finally realized he wasn't talking to his team anymore. He was talking to the company's immune system. Adrian closed the folder. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "Effective immediately, Evan. You are removed from revenue leadership duties pending investigation. Your system access will be suspended today. Derek, you will not contact Orchard Ridge or any reassigned accounts without written direction from sales ops and compliance. Karen, you will revert ownership fields to their prior state and log it properly." She turned to me again. "Ryan, Orchard Ridge returns to you, and finance will review your compensation adjustment and correct any improper allocation." Evan went quiet. Derek went still. And I felt something I hadn't felt since that moment in the ballroom. Air, not victory, not revenge fantasies, just the clean relief of reality winning over performance. By 2:30 p.m., Evan's email stopped working. His calendar invites disappeared. His name vanished from the org chart like it had never been there. At 3:05, HR sent me a short message. "Your communication access restrictions were applied in error and have been rescinded." In error! They couldn't say his name, but they didn't have to. At 4:10, Marcus emailed again. Subject, "Thanks. 2 lines. Appreciate the clarity. I'll work with you moving forward. Please keep the noise away from my team." I replied with 1 sentence. "Understood. I'll handle it." And for the first time in days, I meant it. The final meeting happened a week later, after the holidays, when the office stopped pretending everything was festive. Adrian called me in, not to congratulate me, but to close the loop. Evan had resigned, effective immediately. That's what the memo said. What it meant was, the company gave him the choice to leave quietly or be terminated loudly. Derek was reassigned to a non-client-facing role and put on a performance plan. No hero arc, no applause, just consequences. Sales ops implemented a new control. Every ownership change required a ticket, a manager's written rationale, and an automated notification to finance if any restricted codes were touched. The machine got sharper because someone tried to abuse it. And my commission? It was corrected on the next payroll run with a clean line item labeled adjustment, prior allocation error. I stared at that word, error, and almost laughed. But I didn't, because the money wasn't the real payoff. The payoff was the moment a few days later when I walked into a quiet conference room with Orchard Ridge on video, and Marcus said in front of his whole team, Ryan, we're glad you're still our guy. No champagne, no stage, no fake laughter. Just trust, restored. That night, I drove home in silence, hands steady on the wheel, and I realized the calm felt unfamiliar. Not because I'd lost something, because I'd finally stopped carrying people who were willing to shove me aside in public and steal in private. On Christmas, my boss pushed me aside. He thought that was the end of my story. It wasn't. It was the moment I started writing it like evidence.